Hey everybody, thank you for joining us on our first day. We've never done this type of thing. Has everybody seen the snow? Oh yeah. All right, that's been in the works since February. Okay, so obviously you're all here to figure out what's different about us. You know, because I know everybody's heard, that we're so effective, we can do tetracycline, etc. It's all based on science. My typical lecture is 3 hours. My first involvement in a clinical study in whitening was 1977, so I've been at this for a long time. And I started my own company because I was tired of other companies that I consulted for not really wanting to get on board with putting the science to work. So anyway, I know you've all been seeing this ad in the journals and things, and I thought you might like to see the full case. This is a case done by Dr. Victor Burdick in Littleton, Colorado. And it's just so cool. I love looking at this. The worst type of tetracycline case is when you've got a band in the cervical. And still, look what Victor did. Just amazing. Okay, so what we all have to understand is, how does whitening work? You know, you put this gel on the teeth and the teeth get white. How does that happen? Well, there's two phases of whitening, and they're happening at the same time. The first one's called oxygenation, and the second one is called conversion. At least I call it conversion. So the first phase, and remember these are happening at the same time, is oxygenation, which I like to call scrubbing bubbles. What's happening is all of these radicals, the ions, the oxygen even, it's really starting to break up a lot of the organic and even inorganic debris within the tooth and actually get rid of it. So we have these long chain stain molecules, breaks them into smaller chunks, and literally takes them out of the teeth. Well, that does two things. Number one, it makes the teeth lighter, but also it cleanses the tooth. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Now, the second phase is true whitening. This is conversion. What happens is you have the various radicals given off by peroxide attacking this long chain dark stain molecule, breaking it down to tiny molecules. Now, the smaller the molecules get, the lighter in color they get. Well, when they get down to this point where they don't have what we call chromophores in them, they appear colorless or white. That's how whitening is actually happening deep within the tooth. So now, how many in here have whitened the teeth of someone, say, between the ages of 14 and 16 years old? Come on, raise your hands up high. Yell it out if you disagree with me, but I'll tell you what you saw. You saw those teeth get white just like that. Now, if you have whitened the teeth of someone in their 80s, you may have found that it can be like beating your head against the wall. Well, why is that? What's going on? Over the years, as we're eating and drinking, and remember, our saliva is full of organic and inorganic debris. This stuff will actually penetrate the tooth and become intrinsic, right? We all know it goes from extrinsic to intrinsic, and it will plug up the microstructure. Now, the other thing we know is that these molecules have a tendency to want to join to each other. Two molecules become a big one, two big ones become a huge one, etc. So now you get this tightly woven complex between the enamel rods, and I don't care what. If you're going to do in-office whitening and the teeth have gotten plugged up, and of course you know the older they are, the more difficult they're going to be to whiten as a general rule, but you don't know exactly where they are, so you bring the patient in to do a 1 hour in-office whitening. I don't care whether you use a light or not, what brand you use, how fresh it is or how strong it is. If the bleaching factors can't get in the tooth, nothing's going to happen. And so that's why the unpredictability. So imagine doing a 1 hour in-office whitening on this guy. What do you think you're going to see? Probably nothing. So what is our goal? Our goal is to flood the microstructure with the bleaching factors for an extended period of time. Why? Mostly the oxygenation, because we want cleansing and cleansing and cleansing. Now, let me ask you another quick question. If you've whitened the teeth of someone, say you did 2 weeks of at-home whitening, and after you were done, they came back and you were all happy. Maybe you're not seeing the kind of results that you're seeing here, but you were happy. Now the patient comes in a year and a half later and they say, hey doc, my teeth have gotten a little bit darker again. Do you put them through 2 more weeks of whitening? No, you just have them wear their trays a couple nights or a couple days, whatever, bam, they're right back to where they were. Question is, why did they whiten so quickly the second time? Well, you did some cleansing that first time. Now what's the difference between whitening the teeth of a 14-year-old and a 15-and-a-half-year-old? It's only a year and a half. Well, yes, that patient picked up stain over that year and a half, but it didn't have time to get clogged in and compressed. So now those radicals go zipping right through it and burst the color up. So what we like to do is we want to capitalize on that concept. Now, I know that all of you have either read or heard of the studies, multiple studies have been done, that show that your typical custom-made whitening trays that we make in dental offices or dental labs, along with the typical gels out there, result in only 25 to 35 minutes of active whitening, after which it tapers off rapidly. Why? Why is that? Well, it's because of this. Saliva and sulcular fluid. They both have very high concentrations of a natural antioxidant that we call peroxidase. Now the only job of peroxidase is to destroy peroxide on contact. So here's what happens. The saliva gets underneath the tray and the sulcular fluid gets underneath the tray and it destroys peroxide on contact. Now here's the interesting thing. When they're doing these studies that we've all heard about or read, where they're taking their grab samples, so they're to see how much it's been used up, they're taking it from the middle third. Where does the saliva get in first? In the cervical. So we know that if we're only getting 25 to 35 minutes of aggressive whitening in the middle third, we're seeing a lot less in the cervical. So that's one reason why you typically see the cervicals lagging even further behind than you would normally expect. So again, what is our goal? Prolonged whitening with oxygenation. So how do we do that? We start out with something that I used to call deep bleaching trays. Now we call them core seal trays. But what these trays do is, right along the cervical of the tooth, they compress against the tooth, and when you get the gel in, they create a seal that seals the gel in, but more importantly, it seals out the saliva and the sulcular fluid. So now, right there, that's where the seal is. Notice it's not covering the gingival margins. If it covers the gingival margins at all, it's going to force the sulcular fluid right into the trays, and we're dead in the water. So now, when you have the proper physical properties, because remember, if you don't have a tray that seals like this, what do you got to do? You have to make a gel that's really, really viscous and really insoluble to help fight the saliva coming in. We don't want to do that because it's harder for the bleaching factors to get out of the gel. So what we use is a lower viscosity, still viscous, but lower viscosity and 100% soluble, so that now those whitening factors can just zip right into the tooth. And what we are showing, because of this, instead of 25 to 35 minutes, we're showing 6+ hours of whitening, with some activities seen out to 10 hours. Big difference. This is where it all starts. So now, I just threw this in because Tanya is one of our newer employees, and she has tetracycline staining. Now she's real lucky in that her band is right here. Now the first thing I wanted to know is this translucency or is it tetracycline staining? Well, you should know that not only fluorosis, but also tetracycline has an effect on the ameloblasts. So yes, lots of times when you have translucency, you also, tetracycline staining, you also have translucency. And so we did what's called a cotton roll test, where you come here and you put a cotton roll behind it, and if all of a sudden the teeth are white, you're dealing with only translucency. When we put the cotton roll in, lightened up a little bit, but we still had that dark band. Well, anyway, so you can all take a look at her teeth. She's only 13 days into this. So she's only about 25% of the way, and she's already looking pretty good. Anyway, I wanted to show you this. The day Tanya started, which was almost 2 weeks ago, I took a picture of her trays in her mouth. Now look at the detail along there. I'm going to show you a close-up. Now remember, these are flexible whitening trays. Look at the adaptation. And right along here is where our seals are. So now, what's the most important step in our entire procedure? It is the impression system. Because we've got to get the proper impression to be able to make trays like this. We not only have to capture the gingival margins, we have to capture the gingival crevices. And we need to do that facial and lingual, anterior and posterior, because everybody functions a little bit at night. Not everybody's a grinder or bruxer, but everybody functions. So if you have this tray that moves a little bit, the sides flex out, saliva gets under, and you're dead in the water. So that's what we capture. Facial, lingual, anterior, posterior. And it's a whole different type of an impression system that of course you're taught, and the training comes with the system and the whole bit. One of the things that has been a pet peeve of mine that no other company that I've consulted for wanted to deal with, and that is realizing that all whitening gels are unstable chemicals. That's a good thing. They're supposed to be. That's why when we put them in the mouth, they can break down. But we all know that without refrigeration, unstable chemicals will start to break down immediately upon manufacture. And when they're in trucks being shipped here and there where it's hot, they break down even faster. So, when I started my company, very first thing I did is what I had told all these other companies they needed to do, and nobody wanted to spend the money or make the effort to do it, and that was constant refrigeration. So from the instant of manufacture till the instant it gets into your office and goes into your refrigerator, it's refrigerated. So what this means is we don't have to use stabilizers. We don't, we can keep our chemistry extremely fresh. So now, another thing that a lot of you have heard is sensitivity. And some people say, Rod, it doesn't make sense. Your system is so effective, why doesn't it cause a lot of sensitivity along with that? Well, there's two basic reasons. One is, I'll go back to refrigeration. Well, we all know the hydrodynamic theory that says that when you push or pull on dental tubular fluid, you cause discomfort. Osmolarity. The higher osmolarity the bleaching gel is, the more it pulls on that dental tubular fluid. Well, guess what? If you don't refrigerate these unstable chemicals, you've got to add chemical stabilizers in. There's two types. And these elevate the osmolarity. Now, when you compare a product like ours that is 100% aqueous, 100% neutral with buffering systems, to the products with stabilizer, with both types of stabilizers, theirs will be 11 times greater osmolarity, 11 times greater pull on that dental tubular fluid. So right there, all of our products are the lowest osmolarity possible. And we still, because of the refrigeration, we still achieve an 18 to 24 month shelf life. Now the second is desensitizer. Well, you know about that oxygenation cleansing I talked about. The downside of that is the oxygenation can remove smear plugs, causing more sensitivity. That's one of the reasons why we see sensitivity with whitening in general. Well, our desensitizer is a HEMA-based desensitizer that plugs dental tubules instantly. Now, this is not only used in the office, but it is used by the patients. They get the desensitizers they take home. So every night when they're whitening, any tubules that are opened, in the morning, they're applying this and replugging those tubules. So now, a lot of scuttlebutt has gone around about deep bleaching, and dentists will say, yeah, Rod, I heard your system's really incredible. Boy, it's a lot of work and it's really expensive. Well, to a slight degree that used to be true, but with all the more recent research of mine over the last 4 years, it now doesn't cost any more to do this than if you did a combination in-office and at-home with any of the other systems out there, and it takes no more time. Now, we have a system for basically every situation, but in general, you can do either at-home only whitening or a combination of at-home and in-office. And it just depends. Some offices do one, some offices do the other. Most offices do both. You give your patients the option depending upon how much they want to spend. So, I'm just going to go over the very basic steps. Now, the at-home only and the full system are exactly the same except at the end. So you start out with that unique impression that I talked about. And then there's the fabrication of the core seal trays. Now you're taught how to do that in the training. We have a lab that does an amazing job. Well, you saw a picture of that. Then your average patients wear the trays while they sleep for 14 nights. Of course, your difficult cases like tetracycline, they're going to do it longer. And every morning, your patients are going to apply that desensitizer at home. And then they go into long-term maintenance. That's the at-home only system. Now, if you're doing the full system, you're doing exactly the same thing, except here at the end, you're doing an in-office with a higher concentration with the tri-barrel hydramide system. And you're going to be using retractors and paint on dam, etc. And then when you're done with that, then they go into their long-term maintenance. So now, how do you get started? You get started with the startup kit, which has all of the training information and everything that gets you started, because our goal is to have dentists find a system that they love and keep using it. It doesn't do us any good for you to try our system and never use it again. That does nobody any good. So what we do to make it easy to get started is we greatly discount the startup kit, and we have a show special, of course, that my staff will be able to talk to you about. And then we have something else that I'm really, really proud of. Basically, I decided that I'm going to put my money where my whitening is. And so we are the only whitening company in the world to ever have a guarantee like this. You get a startup kit, and it could be for 10 patients, 5 or 2 or whatever, but you get a startup kit after you've done 2 cases. If you do not agree this is the most effective system, you can have all your money back. No one's ever offered that before.